It's time once again to step out, step up, and step into the Coming Out Lounge, a safe space to be you and your truth with coming out coach Rick Clemens. Rick's expertise in the coming out process has helped hundreds of men and women step out of the closet to live authentically as gays and lesbians. Freeing you from the feelings of guilt and shame, Rick's heart-centered approach is loaded with bankable advice and take-action tips for living powerfully on the other side of the closet door. Each week, the Coming Out Lounge brings you heartwarming coming out stories, thought-provoking insights, and diverse perspectives for living out and proud. Pull up a chair and spend an inspiring hour in the Coming Out Lounge, stepping out, stepping up, and stepping into living your truth. Here's the host of your show, Coming Out Coach Rick Clemens.
Yeah, here we are, sitting here, Parenthood 101, teenagers flying back and forth, going into middle school, going to high school, and looking at colleges. How many of you can relate to that? And then suddenly one day you'll be walking them down the aisle. But in the midst of all that, just prior to starting to go through some of those big life transformations, the big bugaboo I threw into my children's life was, I have something to tell you about Dad. Dad's a little bit different than your other friends' dads. Dad happens to love men and like men, and I want to create a life with a man, just like I created a life with your mother. However, there was something kind of missing. And if I could tell you anything as my children, don't ever live life with something missing. There's a real joy of being hidden, but it's an absolute disaster to never be found. I'm Coming Out Coach Rick, and today we are doing a show that I've been looking forward to since I started the Coming Out Lounge. It's a show about what it means to be a gay parent, what it means to be a lesbian parent, a transgender parent, whatever the label is, a bisexual parent. And it's also about what does it mean to stand there in that room when your child comes to you and says, oh, by the way, Mom, Dad, I'm gay, I'm lesbian. This show, we're going to go full circle. We're going to step into some spaces that I personally have dabbled in with my audience through the last couple of months that I've been running my show. But I also thought it was a perfect time to bring someone back that was one of my favorite guests. And this woman kicked off with me a He Said, She Said show a couple of months ago where we talked about being late bloomers, coming out late in life. She's a fellow coming out coach, and she also works powerfully with single and lesbian couples to create powerful relationships that work, and to uncover those gems of truth that help you go, yes, I really do love being in relationship, not only with myself, but with my partner. So this week, I'm bringing back Denise LaFrance, my fellow coming out coach from Maine, and we're going to go talk all about the fears, the joys, the challenges, and the funny things that happen on the way to being gay parents or being the parent of a gay child. Welcome back, Denise.
Hey, Rick. Thank you very much for that intro. That's very sweet.
Well, it's so good to have you back. And I know we've talked a couple of times since, but I really did enjoy having you on the show the last time. And, you know, let's just say what it is. We both got a lot of kudos off that show from our different tribes that we kind of had a nice, we just kind of had a nice little, you know, synergy between the two of us. And I thought, you know what, why take something that's working and throw it out the door? So
yeah, and I agree, and I think it's absolutely cool to have both the male and female perspectives on everything. So I think this is great. It's a great idea.
Absolutely. So we're going to just jump right in. And again, folks, if there's anything you'd like to tweet out, Denise's Twitter is at @EmergeIntoYou. Mine is at Rick Clemens. And my hashtags are #ComingOutLounge or #CO Lounge. But I just want to jump right in, and let's just start talking about, and I'll go first, Denise, and I know you're really good at just bouncing off where I'm at.
Okay.
You know, one of the greatest fears that I had, and I think it's something that we as parents are innately born with, when that moment that we realize we're going to be a parent, is the fear of, what if I do something and it hurts my children? I think that's just who we are. And I'm not discounting that there's parents out there that don't have that innate ability, because there are some, but they're doing the best with what they've been given in any given moment. And I know for me, in that moment that and I'm not going to go back through and tell my complete story, but in the moment that I did spend the hours on an airplane writing about what I was going to do when I landed in Los Angeles and came home to tell my wife that I was coming out of the closet and I needed to be real, my kids were not anywhere close to a low priority. In fact, they were probably equally up there with the feelings I had about my wife. And I was scared from the inside out, scared that I would lose my kids, scared that the relationship I had with them would change, even though they were very, very young. And what I realized in that moment of being scared was I got to stand at choice. I got to stand at choice at how I did it, how I worked it from that point forward, and how I could constantly be a beacon of truth, honesty, and integrity with my kids. So how similar does that sound to your story, Denise?
It's actually, as it seems to be the case a lot of the times, pretty similar. I think that my particular fear around how the outside world would treat them and how they would be affected by my sexuality is something that was huge on my mind. But at the same time, I really realized at some point that, living my life and doing the best I could as a parent and role model really did to some degree mean that I had to be truthful about who I am, just like I would want them to be honest and live the life they were meant to live. That's what I always talk to my kids about, that I would want them to be happy and find love. And that's what I deserved as well. And that's
Right.
what I ultimately came to.
Well, I think this is a very powerful place when we stand in that space of navigating over selfishness and into a space of self-love, and realizing in the moment of self-love, we become more loving.
Yes, I agree.
And this is a really challenging concept, especially in a society today where it's very much me, me, me. There's a balance between me, 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 and beautiful self-love that enables us to love. And I have to be honest, in watching some of this generation, it concerns me at times. There's an undercurrent in this younger generation, I'm talking my kids' age and maybe up to the 20-somethings, that I think there is almost that understanding that I can love myself and still love other people. Now, there's a whole nother realm of the extreme me, me, me. So what are you observing, from where you sit, Denise? Is this something similar you observe, or are you seeing some other stuff as well?
Well, I think for the most part, kids of straight or gay parents are, their world is their world for the most part. Their world does not encompass a lot of other people besides them. And I think that's sort of common to most junior high, young middle school and high schoolers. And I think that their world opens up hugely when you start a dialogue with them when they're young about the importance of living who you are, but purposefully never hurting somebody. There's for some people a fine line for those two things, but I think it's a really important distinction that for people who are leaving their marriages because they're gay, it's an extremely difficult place to be, and nobody would do it just on a whim. It's generally very carefully thought out, and nobody would want to hurt the people that they love. And your kids are typically number one on that list of who you would never in the world want to hurt. Right. So I think it's a lesson for kids on how to be true and how to be caring at the same time, because part of the importance is to be able to shelter your kids when you can, teach them when you can, and also to, to help guide them through, all of the potholes that they're going to run into anyway.
Right. And we've got a couple of minutes till the first break. So once again, this time really starts flying fast. But something you just said really came forward as kind of a lesson, that the minute that you allow your child to feel like they are less than in this scenario, and that you've given no thought to what you're doing by coming out of the closet, and they can see that, when they can clearly see this is all about mom or this is about dad, and that's the projection that they're receiving, whether that's intentional or not. I think this is one of the first lessons, and I do work with people, and I'm sure you've done the same, of people always say, well, how do I do this with my kid? And I guess what I would say, instead of saying never let him see you sweat, never let him see you be inauthentic.
Right.
I just think that's a really powerful way. So we've got about a minute to break. Denise, what would be another lesson you could throw at someone really quickly that you would say, never let your kids, and finish the sentence?
Never let your kids stop talking. It's important to always, to not expect for them to bring up the difficult conversations around what they're feeling and thinking. Yeah. To always be touching base with them. So don't let them just, clam up. Talk to them constantly.
And I think that's a really powerful place to go to break, because when we come back, we're going to talk about how do you talk to your kids? What do you tell them? And this is what the Coming Out Lounge is all about this week, being in integrity, honesty, and truth as gay parents.
You've been listening to The Coming Out Lounge, a safe space to be you and your truth with coming out coach Rick Clemens. We'll be right back after these messages.
I look into the window of my mind.
Fertility. It's an extremely personal subject. Tune in Monday nights at 9, 8 Central for the Fertility Forum with infertility psychotherapist and expert Phyllis Martin on TogiNet.com. This is the show about infertility, gaining support, and information. Phyllis will assist you in navigating the disappointments and decisions that often accompany the difficult journey from diagnosis to conception, pregnancy to parenthood. She is passionate about her work and is an expert in the donor egg field, bringing both her personal and professional experience to all she does. Ms. Martin has extensive experience in helping patients cope with infertility, pregnancy loss, adoption, surrogacy, miscarriage, pregnancy termination, and creative family building. She knows what you're going through, and she's here to help. It's the Fertility Forum with your host, Phyllis Martin, Monday nights at 9, 8 Central on TogiNet.com.
Everyday Autism Miracles with Shannon Penrod. Friday afternoons at 2, 1 Central on TogiNet.com. Life after an autism spectrum diagnosis doesn't have to be difficult. It can be joyful, happy, and filled with hope. Join Shannon Penrod, author, speaker, coach, and mom of a 6-year-old recovering from autism, for this inspirational hour of hope. She's even authored a series of children's autism books with her son, Jim. For more information about the books, Shannon, and Everyday Autism Miracles, go to her website, shannonpenrod.com. From there, you can also get to her other websites, blogs, and connections. On Everyday Autism Miracles, you'll hear stories from parents whose children have made miraculous strides. You'll also get the inside dish on therapies, treatments, supplements, and how to get funding to help you afford them. Miracles abound in the autism community, so tune in for Everyday Autism Miracles to listen, share, laugh, and surround yourself with hope. Everyday Autism Miracles with Shannon Penrod. Friday afternoons at 2, 1 Central on TogiNet.com.
Welcome back to the Coming Out Lounge with your host, Rick Clemens.
And welcome back. We're inviting you into the conversation today as parents, gay parents, or parents of children who are gay and lesbian. I'm back with my good friend and fellow coming out and relationship coach, Denise LaFrance. And right before we went to break, Denise said something very powerful. She talked about, never letting your kids stop talking to you. And I think this is not some earth-shattering revelation, but it's something that we tend to forget to remind ourselves that the moment we shut down the conversations with our children is the moment we actually invite them to shut down. So I know one of the questions I've gotten often as the coming out coach, especially when I'm working with someone who's been married, is, well, how do I tell my kids and how do I get them to understand? So, Denise, I just asked you that question. I'm your client. What'd you say?
Yeah. Well, I think it depends a lot on the age of the kid. From my point of view, when children are very young, the need in their lives for stability and calmness and the expression of love is really what they need. They don't need a lot of detail. They probably don't have a lot of interest when they're really young. My kids were 5 and 7, and at that age, they were able to ask me direct questions. And when they asked me direct questions, I gave them honest, direct answers, with the caveat that I do feel that you always need to have that parental boundary around what's appropriate and not appropriate for what you share around your personal relationships.
Right.
So, I think it depends a lot on the age of the kid. I think that mostly their first concern is always going to be, how is this all going to affect me? And that's very natural for kids to think that way. So I think always communicating that they will always be cared for and loved by you through everything is paramount. I think that's huge.
Well, yeah, and I agree 100%. I mean, it's almost like you and I are like connected at a cerebral level, because it is about truly tuning in and understanding what they need right then and there in their life. Our kids were similar ages. Mine were 5.5 and 2 at the time that I came out of the closet. And what they needed right then and there was assurance that daddy wasn't going away and mommy wasn't going away.
Right, exactly.
Bottom line. They needed to know that they were going to wake up in the morning and have a place to sleep, some food to eat, and that they were going to still get to have fun and be with their friends.
Right.
So these are the things that, when someone says, well, how do I do this with my kids? Do just what you've been doing. Dial in. Literally dial into what is their need. As a teen, What is their need? What does your teen need now? Your teen needs to be assured that your life and how you're living is going to be just a subset of who they are. It isn't going to be a dominant. Mm-hmm. And as I ventured further and further into the, journey, I realized the more nonchalant I made it in my life that I was a gay father, the less questions, the less of a big deal it became, not only within our own household, but within the community and the circles that we ran in.
Right. Yeah, and I think that when my daughter, who's older, got a little bit older than the 7, I remember having specifically a conversation around her that, life is all about change and sometimes who we thought we were isn't who we discover we are. And that happens as kids and it happens as adults.
Yeah. And I think this is where we have to realize that as our children, I love that you brought up the word adults, as our children go from the 4 or 5-year-old or the 8 or 10-year-old or the 13 or 15-year-old that had this impact show up in their life, there will still be moments that we have to be dialed in, listen to them, and understand what their need is each step of the way. I have teens now, and their need for how we interact and how their gay dad is in their life is totally different than what it was when I first came out of the closet.
Right.
So, I find it a little bit interesting too that the question that, and I know you had something you want to say, but I want to throw this out before I forget it. The question that I often get is, how am I going to help them understand and accept? Mm-hmm. And without sounding trite and like a big asshole, which I love to be a big asshole in my section. So if you don't like to be challenged that way, then I'm probably not the coach for you. But what I love is saying you can't help them understand and you can't help them accept. You can guide, you can respect, and you can just be in those moments. But it's up to
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think the word guide and just give them information that they then process. You can't make anybody think anything, and that goes for your peers and for your children. And giving them the information that you feel is important for them to have is really the best that you can do. And they will then take that information and they'll weave it together. One of the things I was going to say is, one of the things that I have found to be helpful for some folks is to actually write a letter that you're never going to send to your individual children and about what's happening in, basically telling them in a letter first. And it really helps you to organize your thoughts. Mm-hmm. And because so much of the time there's so much emotional upheaval going on for us as adults who are going through this, huge metamorphosis, that to get things down on paper, it really, really helps. And look at the tone of how you're communicating. Are you apologizing for who you are? Or, is it all about all of the negatives that could happen as a result of what's happening? Because you really set yourself up for you reaping what you sow when when you come at it with a very negative attitude.
Absolutely. And I think this is where it kind of, the reason I called this show Both Sides of the Coin, much of what we're talking about applies to the parent who's facing the child who's just said, I'm gay. You need to be willing to open up and dial in. And now I'm going to go both directions. As the person who's just said I'm gay, as well as the person who's receiving the information, both of you would be wise to dial into what's being said and really realize there are now values that are being tested. There are now beliefs that are being challenged. There are now layers of love that are being pushed through that envelope like never before. And when we can both sides embrace that, and it's interesting how, at least from my purview, being the one who came out of the closet and wanting to take care of my kids and seeing my own parents receiving that information, the energy and the navigation is identical from both parties. It's just something that happens. And I don't know that many people have ever held it and looked at it that way.
Yeah. Now, do you find, Rick, that the questions that you get asked from your kids and from family really they really show the amount of effort they're putting into processing and understanding?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the keys. And I'm so glad you brought that question up, because if we immediately jump, which I know as humans, and I know myself, I jumped immediately to a lot of assumptions about something that would get said, instead of saying, okay, this is where they are in their process. This is where they are in their understanding. This is where they are in their acceptance. Yes, did I want immediate? I wanted the hallelujah. I wanted everybody embracing me that I finally found myself. Mm-hmm. But as you and I talked in the show that we did last time, when we walk through that door, we've been preparing for this quite a long time.
Right.
The people who get pulled through the door with us have not had that time.
Absolutely. Their world is changing, and, and it takes time to adjust and accept. And, it's so funny when you talk, I can hear echoes of myself like crazy when you talk about how you felt like this, joy of, oh, look at me, look at the life I'm now going to live. That's so, that's going to be so good for me. I want you to love me because of, in spite, and all of that stuff. And it's hard to remember sometimes that, like you said, we're dragging them through the door, whether they're ready or not. And that patience piece, boy, that's critical when you bump up against a reaction that's less than what you would have hoped, which happens, a decent deal of the time.
Right.
Because they haven't had the time to process it.
Well, no, they haven't. And I think this is where, and we're going to go to a break in about a minute, but I think, again, we're in a beautiful place where we move from, so how do they process this? And how do our children then begin to process, what does sexuality mean to them? What does sexuality mean if they start questioning their own? Because no matter what they hear from the outside world, one of the messages that will show up is, oh, well, then this means that you're going to be gay or you're going to be lesbian too. And that is the furthest thing from the truth. There's so much that's been proven that says otherwise. And when we come back from the break, we're going to jump in. We're going to go a little bit deeper, and we're going to talk about how to help your children embrace yours and their sexuality in the most powerful way possible as human beings. We'll be right back in just a few moments.
You've been listening to The Coming Out Lounge, a safe space to be you and your truth with coming out coach Rick Clemens. We'll be right back after these messages.
I look into the window of my mind.
Connect with Juliana and connect with what lies beneath. Friday afternoons at 4, 3 Central on TogiNet.com. Juliana is certified as a life coach who wants people to connect with what lies beneath, those truths and answers. And through her counseling practice, she has helped others find their personal power and fulfill their dreams. And she wants to do the same for you here on Connect with Juliana. Through intimate discussions, intriguing subject matters, and the expertise of her guests.
For more on Juliana and her show, check out her website, connectwithjuliana.com.
Juliana will cover it all. Nothing is off limits. She wants to know what matters to you. Make the connection. Tune in to TogiNet to connect with Juliana to find out the facts that could be hidden beneath the surface. Connect with Juliana on TogiNet to make a quality connection in your life. Friday afternoons at 4, 3 Central on TogiNet.com.
Information about book publishing is power. The power to change your authoring life. And the power to change the lives of your readers. So join us for Your Guide to Book Publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles. Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 Pacific on the Rockstar Radio Network. You'll hear about statistics, scenarios, and strategies on what to do now. As the book shepherd, Dr. Judith Briles is in. And each week, she will include publishing professionals that will reveal tips and secrets to the author's journey. If there is a book in you want to listen, learn, and yes, call in with your questions each week. For more on Judith and what she can do for you, check out her website, thebookshepherd.com. It's your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know, but didn't know what to ask. Brought to you by Author You and The Book Shepherd, with your host, Dr. Judith Briles. Thursday evenings at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, on the Rockstar Radio Network.
Welcome back to the Coming Out Lounge with your host, Rick Clemens.
And we're back, and we're talking with my good friend Denise LaFrance about gay parenting, being the parent of a gay and lesbian child. But before we get back into it, I just want to talk about some upcoming shows. Next week, I'm bringing on a really interesting guy. He's an attorney, so don't get scared. We're not going to talk about the legalities of getting married and all that stuff. But what we are going to talk about is, as a gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgender person, what are some of the things that we come up against because, well, we just don't exactly have the same rights as others, especially when it comes to being in relationship with someone. Lots of things that we overlook. So that's going to be a really powerful show. And as we're entering through September, and actually by the time we do next week's show, we will be 1 month away from National Coming Out Day. So the month starting next week all the way through to October 11th, we will be celebrating National Coming Out Day and bringing you some very powerful guests, some topics about how to come out, and just really sharing our heart and soul around what it's like to really stand and live in your truth. So now let's get back to Denise and where we left off, which was kind of like, we're going to talk a little bit about our kids. Once we kind of open the doorway, they see this is who mom or dad is, and things begin to settle down, if they do. And in some cases, they don't. Some cases, they don't turn out pretty. Some cases, the ex-spouse will say, no, you can't have any contact and all this sort of stuff. There are still ways, even in those moments, to truly help your kids transition. And what I want to talk about now is really helping children embrace their sexuality. So from your perspective, Denise, was this ever like a challenge for you with your kids?
Yeah. That would be an affirmative. I especially from what I understand and the experience I've had with folks, the same-sex child definitely struggles the most with the whole sexuality piece. They, before the break, you mentioned about, the kids asking the question, does this mean I'm gay? Well, my daughter came out and asked me that question. And she also talked about the fear that she had that everybody at school would make that assumption. And boy, I tell you, that's a really hard place to be as a parent, to have, your kid feel fear around an assumption made because of you. But it's a great opportunity to have that discussion around, sexuality and the fact that, my sexuality has no bearing on her sexuality. Chances are much better that she's straight than gay. But regardless of her sexuality, I would love her absolutely 100% regardless.
And I think what you just finished that statement with is the utopia of authenticity. Whether your child chooses to believe that or not is going to be a challenge, because they are embroiled in what's happening to me, why is this happening to me, how is this going to affect my life. But when you allow that piece to come forward, that no matter what, I'm going to love you beyond a shadow of a doubt, and you authentically mean it, that's the key piece. Mm-hmm. At some point in most relationships, things will begin to settle. But your kids have to hear it. They have to constantly hear it, that I will love you no matter what. And begin to bring them powerful pieces of need-to-know information about sexuality, what is sex about, what does it mean when someone of the same sex is in a relationship, what does it mean that your sex and your sexual experiences are going to take on a different flavor than what the traditional heterosexual are. These are all stages of conversations that you may get to, you may not. But be ready, willing, and able, as I like to say, to have the discussion when the entree gets served.
Right. And, it was my experience that around the age, and I'd be curious to hear yours, around the ages of 11 and 12, junior high, that's when they start, regardless, I think, of whether they are being put into, living a heterosexual parental life, and then all of a sudden maybe having a gay parent and a adoptive gay parent, all of a sudden they feel like they have to start hiding, because all of a sudden at that age of 11 and 12, junior high, kids start becoming much more aggressive around, their homophobic slurs, and you can have kids that seem to be doing pretty well, and then there'll be a bump, and that bump is them trying to find their footing in a world that all of a sudden is showing homophobia.
Mm-hmm. And I think the finding the footing comes back to then we as parents being tuned in and listening to when it feels like they're losing that footing. This week was a really interesting week because it was the first week back to school. My youngest is in 8th grade, so she's, at the top of the, heap in middle school right now, at least here in California. I know some go to 9th grade, but in our school system, 8th grade, you're the top of the heap before you step into high school. And over the holiday weekend, she said, I'd like to have such and so come over and spend the night. And I said, well, I'm not sure I know who that person is. Have I met her? And then once she described, I'm like, okay, yeah, I know who she is. But I said, are you sure she's okay with your home life? And she just kind of looked at me kind of strange. And I said, is she okay with you having 2 gay dads? She goes, well, I don't think there's a problem. She never said there's a problem. I said, okay, I understand that, but we need to clear 2 bases before we go here. One, that she gets it, and number 2, that her parents don't have a problem with this. Now, that's a lot of responsibility to throw on a kid, but I didn't stop there. I said, and if I need to have the conversation with a parent, just tell me when and where. I felt like by doing that, I gave her the opportunity to, 1, go boldly in a new direction that she hasn't maybe gone with this particular friend, but also to know I'm not throwing you to the wolves. Go figure this out. And I think there's a couple of interesting little lessons in there that honesty and integrity showed up in a real way from Dad, and this is how we do life. And number 2, respect and honoring other people's beliefs is what I was trying to really bring forward.
Right.
So that she can hold this and go, okay, if this friend doesn't have a problem, but her parents do, you just need to respect that. And let it go. So, So as you navigated that piece where, those questions were coming up about, well, what if I end up being that way? What did that do to you internally, Denise?
Well, I think for me, some of the guilt that I had early on resurfaced. It was because of something that I was and how I was living, that it brought up the guilt that I had thought that I had worked totally through at that point. And, I think that's another lesson of growth in that, no matter how far we get in life, there are always going to be things that we as parents and as people are learning. And, when I got the questions, when things seemed to be going pretty well, and then all of a sudden, we hit that bump of junior high, I think it really taught me a lesson that I, as exactly as you said, I really had to be vigilant about what she was going through and my son. And also I had to be really conscious of how I was projecting and how I was feeling. Right. And, one of the things that was my experience too with having kids when they started actually school and in high school even more so, is that they began, especially my daughter, the same-sex child, began to prefer that my partner would not come to high school events. She didn't want to have to answer questions. It was scary for her. And that's, again, a real lesson for me, because it feels hurtful to me. But at the same time, it's more important for me to understand what she's going through and talk to her about that experience. And that ultimately helps both of us.
Absolutely. And as you were talking, one of the things that, I have said to clients in the past who have come to that juncture of suddenly they don't want the person showing up at an event would be, so invite your child into the dialogue. Well, how would you like us to do this where our family doesn't have a problem amongst us and we all feel wanted, desired, and still loved so that everybody feels in balance? And we've got a couple of minutes before we go to break to kind of talk through that. But I think when you allow the child to become part of the solution, it gives him that beautiful opportunity to feel like, wow, I'm really supposed to be involved.
Yeah.
And you set the tone for the future of how they work through difficult challenges that, let's be honest, we're going to face all through life.
Right.
It's very simple. So we've got about a minute to go, Denise. So go ahead, and I'd love to hear your response.
No, I was just going to say, Rick, that with all of our experiences in life, you get a lot further with discussion than you do with just holding on to your hurt and your anger. So instead of being hurt and angry and just sort of closing yourself off from the situation and ignoring it, engaging with your kids is huge. And you made a wonderful point there. I think that's a huge point. Include them.
And I think inclusion is the key to every side of this coin, whether you're the parent with a child coming out or you're the parent who's coming out to your child. Inclusion of thoughts, ideas, emotions, and beliefs is really how we will get through this and come out the other side knowing that the closet door opened and is now closing on a new trajectory for life.
You've been listening to The Coming Out Lounge, a safe space to be you and your truth with coming out coach Rick Clemens. We'll be right back after these messages.
I look into the window of my mind.
Are you powerless to stop making choices that hinder your happiness, your peace of mind, your sense of fulfillment, or success? Have your choices resulted in broken relationships, job losses, and financial chaos? Then be here for Strategies for Healing from Addictions with your hosts, Gary and Sharon Worrell. Monday mornings at 9 a.m. Central on the Rockstar Radio Network. Strategies for Healing coaches and empowers and seeks to help people discover their goals and reach those goals quickly. Provide structure, tools, and perspective to help clients accomplish more in their lives. To encourage clients to think bigger and realize their full potential. Strategies for Healing endeavors to see each individual come to a place of purposeful living apart from addictions. Check out the website, strategiesforhealing.com. Then join us for Strategies for Healing from Addictions with your hosts, Gary and Sharon Worrell. Monday mornings at 9 a.m. Central on the Rockstar Radio Network.
Familia, faith, identity, tradición. Latina life is never boring, but it can be muy dramática. So how do you coexist between the old school ways of la abuela and the new school life you're creating for yourself without losing your faith, familia, identity, or tradiciones? Welcome to Living Latina with Francesca Escoto, where culture curls and curves collide in one spicy cross-cultural conversation that will leave you begging for más. Francesca tackles all the important issues, from politics to family values, to religion to, you guessed it, relationships and men. As Chief Everything Officer at the Wow Factor, Francesca is passionate about showing women of all cultures, ages, and lifestyles how to rock what they've got with style, sass, and smarts. Be sure to join her every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time for Living Latina, only on the Woohoo Radio Network.
welcome back to the Coming Out Lounge with your host, Rick Clemens.
And as we enter into our final segment on gay parenting, both sides of the coin, I just want to give Denise a moment because she's come to the show with a beautiful offer for anyone that's out there listening who might be wanting to work through some stuff or even navigating this road of becoming a gay parent or maybe even in a relationship. So, Denise, the floor is yours to talk a little bit about what you're offering to listeners.
Well, thanks, Rick. What I'd like to offer is if anybody would like to purchase 2 coaching sessions from me, they will get a third one free. And I would like to offer that through September 22nd.
Perfect.
So you can, if you can let them know, Rick, how to contact. Is it through the website that they do that? Or?
The best way to do it is just give them your web address and your phone number right now.
Okay. Well, my web address is emergeintoyou.com, and my email is denise@emergeintoyou.com, and you can contact me directly.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. So now that we've kind of gone through a lot, and this show we could do probably 2 full hours, 3 full hours just talking about the different ways to navigate things, but I want to make sure I throw a couple of concepts out there. Number one, there's a couple of books that I use and I still kind of recommend to clients. One is called What About the Children by Lisa Saffron. And the other one is There's Something I've Been Meaning to Tell You by Laura Lee McPike. And again, both of these books are pretty powerful. Some of it is true story format. Other is giving you some great advice. But there's also a couple of really powerful organizations that I hold close to my heart. One being PFLAG, and you can find out information from them. They have a whole thing on being the parent of a gay and lesbian. That's really the basis of what their organization is about. It's parents, family, and friends of lesbians and gays, pflag.org. And I also really like HRC, Human Rights Campaign. They've got some good information on their side as well as Family Equality Council. Now, Family Equality Council taps into this new era of being gay and lesbian parents from the perspective of it's all types of parents, because some parents adopt, some parents do surrogacy, and some parents like Denise and I were married and have children. So those would be the organizations I would truly recommend looking at, tapping into if you're struggling. And of course, finding people like myself and Denise that have been through this, work as coaches to help people. I work with not only people coming out of the closet, but I work with their families, their spouses. I've done a couple of things with the whole family, with the children involved. It is a journey. And I guess that would be my truest, most authentic way of putting it to anyone. It's a journey that you will travel from the moment you say, I'm gay, lesbian, till the moment you take your last breath. So with that being said, and I don't want to end on a real downer.
Wow.
But I think part of what we look at as parents and as we go through these stages, and I brought it up earlier, is be really attuned to, as your child steps through their own journey with you, things are going to change. Just like Denise, you just shared, by the time your child got into high school, she didn't want your partner showing up at things. I know in my case, we have just gotten to a space where we don't really talk about it anymore. But in moments when a friend's coming over or something, that's when the conversations come up. So anything else that you've noticed with your kids that...
Yeah. Well, what I wanted to say as a follow-up, and this gives additional hope, I think, is that, my observation was that once my daughter graduated from high school, it was like this major weight started to shed off of her shoulders. She went to college, and she's now 23, she's graduated. But when she went to college, it was like she just bloomed. And all of a sudden there were, gay kids that she knew that were open, and, some some kids had gay parents, and all of a sudden I was cool. It wasn't that I was being hidden at all. I was cool. And it was really amazing the sort of prison that so many kids seem to find themselves in within their little community. And once they can get out of their community, I think it just opens up their world. And then all of a sudden they start embracing you as the parent for what you've been through, the bravery you've shown in coming out, and the love that you've shown to them as a parent. They can all of a sudden start to see it. It's an awesome thing to witness.
Well, it is. And, one of the things that I throw at my clients, I have Rick's kind of 5 rules for getting through this. And I hate to use the word rules, but 5 insights. Let's position them this way. My 5 insights for how to navigate through this is, number 1, when you lose sight of yourself, you lose sight of your kids. Number 2, when it's all about you, there's no room for making it about them. Patience is critical. You cannot make them accept you. That's number 4. And love conquers all if you allow it to. And the reason I say love conquers all if you allow it to, you can be trite and you can let those words flow off your tongue. But guess what? And I think any parent, whether you're gay or straight, who might listen to this later, or if you're listening right now, your kids know when you're not being authentic. Kids are so tuned in to the bullshitters in life. So I just think if you allow love to really conquer all and do it from that centered heart space place, it will. It may not happen the day after you tell them or the day that you tell them that you're gay, but if you just continue to show up in love and still being a parent, eventually you will see the shift.
And it also, if you think about the way that, as a parent, if I look at my children and say, how did what they went through, how did that affect who they are today? I honestly believe that they are in some ways much more loving, accepting people today because of what they went through and because of what they saw me go through. Right. And so, if you're sort of looking at your life story, it can seem really hard, and then it can seem, pretty good, and then it can seem really hard, and then when you're looking back, it all shaped you. And I believe that they are, more empathetic, better people because of the experiences that we've gone through together as a family.
I agree. And I think one of the lessons that I feel that my daughters have learned the most, and we still struggle. We all come to the table with our own crap on the plate, but this loving yourself as you are piece, if that becomes the centerpiece of where you operate from, it sure makes it a lot easier for your kids to face the bully, to face the snide remarks, to hear the slurs. Because in that moment, when they realize that you have mimicked and shown them the way of being at peace with who you are, and that it's okay, then they begin to walk and talk in the same manner.
Right. It's all modeling.
It is very much modeling. Very much modeling. So if you were to, give somebody a really, you already gave them a beautiful piece of advice about just really, allowing the conversations to continue. What would be another piece of advice you would give someone who's, let's go the other side of the coin, who's facing the child who just said, Mom and Dad, I'm gay?
Well, I guess I would say for that parent, I would say to show interest, to ask questions, because to me, asking questions and showing interest in your child is the doorway to understanding. And it's only when you plug into even being curious and asking questions that you can ever get to the point of fully embracing change. And so, curiosity, questions, love, support, reassurance that, your love is, it doesn't have stipulations attached to it. It's just there. That's what I would want for any parent. And I understand that it takes some parents time to get there. And you know what? That's okay, because that's their journey.
It is. And I think that's such a beautiful piece to bring up as we come to the close of the show. And Denise, I want to thank you for being on. Again, you've been a great guest.
Thank you.
And you always bring such wisdom and light to these conversations. And I'm looking forward to having you on as we venture into the month before National Coming Out Day. But to end the show, I just want to draw upon something Denise just said. In the moments of parenthood, nobody ever said it would be easy. And in the moments of parenthood, nobody ever said, you have to be right. And in those moments of parenthood, to embrace that you will do something wrong and you will disappoint. But in those moments of parenthood, when you hold and stand in your truth and love yourself so that your children can see what loving self can do, you have just accomplished one of the biggest feats of being a parent. And with that, I say have a great week. Don't forget to step out, step up, and step in to living your truth.
Thank you for joining us today with the Coming Out Lounge with your host, Rick Clemens. Make sure you tune in with us next week, same time, same place, for the Coming Out